8 years. 8 goddamn years of my life waiting for this movie. Leading up to its release, I don't think I even fully registered that it was finally real until I was sitting in the theater waiting for it to start. I mean, obviously I saw the trailers and marketing, but it didn't really sink in until then. So, after 8 years of waiting, can I say that it was worth it? Surprisingly, yes. Honestly, I didn't expect to like the movie as much as I did. After the critics panned it, I kind of assumed it would be one of those things I enjoyed, but knew was just kind of deeply flawed underneath. Kind of like how I feel about a good chunk of the recent FNAF media. But to my surprise, I actually really liked the movie. Is it perfect? God no, it has some pretty big flaws, but to me, nothing even came close to ruining the movie for me. Despite this, I think it's a good thing to discuss. In fact, I'm going to start this video with the issues I've had with it, mostly so I could get them out of the way, but also because I think it's good to not blindly praise something. Flaws are an important thing to discuss so that movies or any other form of media can improve. Not to say that Scott Cawthon is going to watch this, but recognizing flaws in media can help you improve your own art. That's the real reason I do all this dang criticizing, because despite what it might be suggested with some of my videos, I don't particularly like being negative. That being said, let's start with the negative. My first and the generally most common complaint about the movie is the lack of actual horror in it, which isn't great when it's supposed to be a horror movie. A lot of people attribute this to the PG-13 rating, which I completely disagree with. In fact, I don't know if FNAF would benefit that much from an R rating in general. FNAF kind of thrives on implied horror as is, and I don't think having super gory death scenes would really help outside of the superficial horror. And you'll never guess what I think they could have improved on for the horror of the film. Yeah, the atmosphere could be better. Honestly, I think it's pretty good at points, but it's inconsistent, which makes the movie never really carry the tension all that far. The first scene with the night guard is really good as a tone setter and for the atmosphere, but it never really has another prolonged moment of tension like this again. The other horror peak for me was when Max was about to die, and that death is probably the best in the movie, not counting William. I think it was a bit over the top though. I think just the head being bitten off would have been more impactful, but half the body was absolutely more shocking, so I'll give them that. But outside of those few scenes, I feel like they could have done a lot more with it. I feel like the whole animatronics moving when you aren't looking could have been done more in general, or scenes like Bonnie being in the closet. Playing that stuff up could have not only helped the horror, but also emphasized the ghostly feel of the animatronics. Honestly, in general, I feel like the animatronics could have had more of a threat in the movie. The Cupcake, of all things, seems to have the largest presence in terms of threat. I feel like the others could have been given a bit more love, especially Freddy. He never really gets a moment of hunting anyone, and his kill is the most memorable, but it's also the one where the animatronic itself doesn't do much. And their threat level towards Mike is honestly pretty low generally. Obviously towards the end they try and go after him, but it ends up kind of being a missed opportunity with Freddy, Bonnie, and Chica all being defeated with almost no effort. It kind of deflated the tension a little bit and made it feel a little bit rushed there. Maybe here we could have had Freddy's big moment, like the electricity in the water causes the lights to go out, then Freddy, being more active in the dark, gets his chance to chase after Mike with the classic Toreador March playing or something. I don't know, I'm not a scriptwriter for movies. But yeah, overall the horror left a bit to be desired. It didn't make it terrible or anything though, and while it is an issue, it didn't really impact my enjoyment to a huge extent. But do you know how cool it would have been to put recapturing atmosphere in the video thumbnail? Do you know? The first act to me honestly kind of worried me. Being someone who's pretty critical of things, I was already kind of worried I wouldn't like it based on the critic reviews. And while the audience reviews showed good signs, I tend not to let things slide just based on it being a property I enjoy. So during the first act, it was kind of worrying when I wasn't really confident in both the direction the story was going in, and it also being very slow, at least to me. The whole dream theory plot was a very hard pill to swallow for me, and while it definitely proved itself by the end of the movie, I can't lie and say it didn't worry me at the beginning. Also, generally, a lot of the plot is a bit more shaky at the start and kind of confusing, especially in the editing department. The cut from needing Abby to get up to go somewhere to him being already at his job was odd. Felt like something got cut there. And establishing that he was a guard working there could have also been done better. Maybe actually putting him in a security office with, I assume, his coworker during the conversation would have made it clearer. Also, what the hell is actually up with that child and his dad? I mean, I get that parents can be annoyed sometimes, but he didn't even say anything to his child. Weird. Maybe it was Mike's mind warping reality a bit because of his trauma? Not sure. I think ideally there could have been an additional scene with the career counselor before he started working at the mall, showing he couldn't keep a job and thus establishing that he's actually going to this new workplace. Maybe there it could have been established that he's seeing things, which would later make him think that the animatronics moving was his own imagination or something. I don't know, just a way to bring back this moment a little bit later. Also, Mike just saying it's time for school or something while talking to Abby could have maybe helped clear the scene up. Or maybe I'm just stupid and everyone else completely followed it all easily. Who knows? There are some things that work well in the first act, though. The aunt you really get to hate in her first scene, which is great character establishment. I think Abby and Mike's relationship is also really well established, and the introduction to Freddy's is pretty good with William on the phone. And the training tape isn't bad either. I feel like something more could have happened on that first night, though. Maybe show Mike leaving as an animatronic is standing down the hall from him. I don't know. Again, while the first act isn't bad, it doesn't do a great job at grabbing me with the odd edits and slower pace. And speaking of, the pacing felt very odd to me throughout the movie. Generally, with a film, I find it's either too slow-paced or too fast-paced, or just paced well, but somehow Five Nights at Freddy's manages to be all three at once, which is very odd to me. The movie starts out pretty slow and exponentially gets faster until you're at the end, which goes by pretty fast. The pacing wasn't unbearably bad or anything, but it definitely could have felt more even. The final act needed some more breathing room, I think. Again, going back to an earlier complaint, I feel like rather than Mike just taking out Bonnie and Freddy immediately, an extended chase or something along those lines with them could have worked to make the final section longer and made the animatronics feel like they had more thread. It would just help round it all out generally. The second act is probably the strongest pacing-wise actually, although the final act is probably my favorite. Though I feel like if the first act was slightly more condensed, then some things from the second act could be put into it, and the third act could be stretched out more, which would make it as a whole feel more consistently paced. What's wild is that from what we know, there are a good number of scenes that were cut, though we don't know how important they would be. Shadow Freddy, the endo, the crime scene, and who knows what else. And these may have helped the pacing out if they were left in. That being said, I don't really feel like there's much missing, which is pretty impressive. It still works without said cut content, without really feeling like anything was cut, at least most of the time. And that leads us to problem number 4. Despite most of the cut things feeling pretty well done, there were some things that I felt like they didn't capture the full potential for. Nothing film-breaking, but some things I noticed, I guess. I think the most obvious one for me was the vandals. There were a lot more things you could realistically do with them. For starters, they all get cleaned up and stuffed off-screen. I don't think they should have played their Afton card this early, but showing that things are being covered up by someone, and even just a short scene could have been neat to see. Something like a shot of them laying on the floor and them being dragged away. I don't know. Additionally, showing the robots they were stuffed into near the end, either showing signs of or just being possessed, could have been a neat way to set up for why William wasn't scared of dying in the suit. Based on the few cutscenes that we know about, it seems like this may have been planned, at least with Shadow Freddy, and it's a shame it had to be cut. I think Mike seeing Max possessing the suit would have been a pretty creepy scene, but Mike never really had a substantial reaction to the fact that Max got killed and stuff, which again is kind of a missed opportunity, although it could be used in a sequel. Also, the whole break-in doesn't really affect Mike at all. It was meant to get him fired from his job, then the biggest consequence of this is that Vanessa finds out that he's been using sleeping pills on the job. I think even a phone call from William/Raglan about it, saying something like, "You caused me a real mess to clean up," or something along those lines, being a double meaning of sorts, where it could be that because Raglan hired him he's in trouble, but in reality he had to clean up the bodies, something like that. Again, not a scriptwriter, but it could have been an organic way for William to show up again and pay off the story beat with him nearly getting fired. It could even come back with William being angry about the extra death and how hard it was to cover up, even using that as leverage for Vanessa because she could be how he covered it up considering her ties to police. Also, we never get the aunt's reaction to Mike not being fired or the vandals not coming back after the break-in, which is odd. Her being killed off screen by Golden Freddy was kind of weird to me. Golden Freddy in general was kind of odd. His spirit was awesome though. I think maybe a scene like Foxy had where the spirit and the animatronic are more clearly linked would have helped Golden Freddy feel more integrated, as he kind of feels like he just disappears, which is true, the suit itself does. But the spirit doesn't, so I feel like a way to tie them both together more clearly than the not Freddy scene would have been nice. Additionally, Afton in general just could have been used more. They had a version of the set that was made to look like it was when the building wasn't abandoned, so maybe a flashback could have worked there. Even in one of the dream sequences to Afton luring a child in the suit could have been really chilling. I feel like there were a number of ways to organically have him show up more, and I don't really think they took any of them, unfortunately. Hopefully future movies use him more effectively. Speaking of the dream plot though, I feel like it could have had a bit more closure than it did. Maybe a scene of Mike just watching the car drive off and not chasing after it or something. could be something they're saving for a sequel, but it seemed kind of unresolved at the end. Again, maybe on purpose. I guess we'll just have to see. But after the scene of him giving up Abby momentarily, we only really get him saying he cares about her as closure for that, and I think it could have used something more to give it a little bit more of an oomph, you know? But I think it might come in due time. Whew, okay, I know that sounded like a lot of missed potential, and it is, but despite that, I feel like the film didn't really feel like it was missing a chunk or anything, which is impressive. Everything still ties up nicely, even if it's not super tight or anything. And with those complaints, we've officially reached the end of the bad. That was a lot of negativity. I feel like I need a bath. Or I could balance it out with some good old-fashioned positivity. I did say I liked this movie, and that's true despite my complaints, so let's talk about the good stuff. The animatronics were legitimately amazing in the film. The Creature Shop really outdid themselves on their designs and puppetry, not to mention the performers as well. Just the accuracy of all of them from the games was really amazing to see. They're probably the most accurate adaptation of any video game character to the big screen, which is awesome to see. I'm really glad they didn't radically change their designs or anything. In the film itself, the animatronics were also all used really well for the most part, especially in the break-in scene. I loved how they all had a moment to shine. Even Chica, who was kind of sidelined during that, later got to be the one to lure Abby to the Springlock suit, so they all felt well realized. Could there have been more? Sure, but I think all of them were well showcased. I know this is a bit more controversial, but I also really enjoyed how they were characterized. The emphasis on the children being what possessed them was a really neat angle that I hadn't really thought of before. I mean, would children just want to kill people? Likely not. Then I liked how they worked around it with them being manipulated by Afton, and it all kind of tied up neatly with how they took him down in the end. I also like that they do focus on the spirits of the children more in the movie. I enjoyed it enough that I would actually want to see more of it. The few moments where the spirits were visible was super neat. The Foxy cut especially really stood out to me. Such an excellent shot. But the real star of the show in that regard is Golden Freddy's spirit. He really knocked it out of the park. Such a creepy performance without being over the top. The stare at the end was just gold. Although Golden Freddy himself was kind of odd. Not bad, and I appreciate his inclusion, though I feel like it would have worked much better if he wasn't shown in the marketing. He really does feel like just a cameo. The spirit feels like much more of a substantial inclusion actually, unlike the other animatronics. I did like him overall though. I actually really liked the human characters in the movie, which kind of surprised me honestly. I kind of thought they were going to be a weak point of the movie, like the animatronics would be the strong point and the humans would just be there, kind of like the Sonic movie. But honestly, I like the humans just as much as the animatronics. Mike was great, as I mentioned before. His relation to Abby and all of his trauma was all explored really well. Not really the direction I thought they would take him in either. I kind of figured he'd be hellbent on avenging his brother, then it would be revealed that it was his father who killed him or whatever, but it ended up being much more interesting than that, to me at least. I really like how he seems like while he wasn't over Garrett being taken as a kid, he's still trying to function. He doesn't go to Freddy's because he thinks it will solve it, he does it because he's trying to keep Abby, the only family he's got left. I think it makes for a neat dynamic of trying to prevent Abby from being taken from him, while still coping with the loss of Garrett, who was also taken from him. The scene where he gives up Abby only to immediately regret it also plays into this idea a bit. I think it's all really interesting and far better than a one-to-one with the game story. Speaking of things that aren't one-to-one, Vanessa. I liked her a lot. Not as much as Mike, but she's an interesting character. I really like how they swapped their roles with her being William's child. It makes for an interesting dynamic with her being in the know but still being manipulated by William, but also wanting him to be stopped. I think it could have been explored a little more overall, but she's already a much more interesting character than Game Vanessa in my opinion. Honestly, I can still see her becoming a secondary villain later if they twist her character right, but even if she's not, she's pretty strong on her own as is. I think my only real problem with her is that she does feel a little exposition-y. I think her and Mike could have had a few more scenes where she isn't just lore dumping. The river scene is pretty good at that, but I have a feeling she's going to come back. I think her dynamic with William is too strong to not use in a future film, honestly. And speaking of William, holy hell, what a character. Despite having too little screen time, he really does steal the show in the scenes he's in. Him acting as a career counselor was a brilliant choice, allowing him to essentially pick his victims. The phone call was also a really good way to set up Freddy's using him, and of course we all knew it was William, so seeing the foreshadowing there was a treat. The way he talks about the owner himself is really cool. As I said before, I think even one or two more scenes with William would have been ideal, but he's far from being bad or anything, he's just good. I wish we saw more of him. During his titular scene, he's just so animated and alive. I love how he absolutely pummels Mike and doesn't hesitate to stab Vanessa. He's insane and he seems to love every minute of it. He's just the right amount of insane as well to not feel cartoonish, but still extremely creepy coming out of another human. The way he just casually mentions how he finds it funny that he's killing Mike after killing his brother years ago is creepy as hell. But despite this, he isn't completely inhuman. He shows some regret on his face after stabbing Vanessa, but still far too little for any person. I just love how he's characterized in the movie. His death is also pretty fucking good. I know some people for some reason don't like the fact that he doesn't scream, but as someone who's been in a lot of pain before, I think the silent reaction is more realistic, and it honestly makes it more brutal for me. The fact that he's in so much pain he can't even scream is pretty horrifying. I like the spring locks in general as well, no surprise there. The fact that it was activated by the cupcake of all things is odd to me. Not really awful or anything, but I think maybe having one of the animatronics shove him to the ground or something, then having him slowly stand back up, then the spring locks activating could have worked. Though then you wouldn't see the hole in the chest, I suppose. Regardless, it was a bit silly, but it didn't really take me out of the film that much, luckily. His "I always come back" did a bit, however. I think it's not the line itself, but rather the lack of build-up for me. Like, man, what the hell are you talking about? Even, like, adding a few lines about how police were led to believe the killer fled the state, but Vanessa saying he never left and kept killing. At least kind of tying back to him always coming back would help. Again, not a scriptwriter, but some sort of build-up to it would have been nice because it really does feel like out of left field. But aside from that, I don't really have any hang-ups on his death, and even that one I wasn't pissed off about it or anything. I was just like, huh. Weird thing to say there, but okay. I was mostly just happy they did the spring lock scene at all, and it felt pretty brutal, which was nice. I liked the way you knew prior that if you're in the suit, you possess it after death, which is why he puts the mask on, and I think it's cool that his death doesn't seem to bother him that much, it's more of an inconvenience. I also like the animatronics dragging him away at the end, very Silver Eyes adjacent, which this whole ending kind of reminds me of, but done better, honestly. I like that it was the spirits who took him out and not just a person. Or robot, I guess. God, those books got weird. Abby was also surprisingly good in the movie. Like, some of the best child acting I've seen, honestly. Huge props to the acting from her. The line delivery was really good, and especially the comedic bits landed super well for me consistently from her. Obviously, she's a kid, so she doesn't have a super deep character to analyze, but it was cool to see that she has almost as much story presence as Mike or Vanessa. She drives the plot a lot of the time, and it makes it all flow really nicely. Like I talked about before, her dynamic with Mike was also really sweet. The end was pretty okay, pretty decent secondary antagonist despite her quick exit. She definitely felt almost cartoonish at points, but it was kind of a nice break from everything else and helped drive the plot forward in a fairly natural way, though she definitely gets sidelined after the first act. I think she could have used 1 or 2 more scenes of her reacting to the disappearance of those she hired, but other than that she's good. Those burglars were also fun, I really enjoyed their scenes. I wish we got a bit more time with them, but I think it was good to use them to establish the animatronics threat, and all their deaths felt unique, which was pretty cool. Max was especially a standout from them. I really wish we got more screen time with her. Hopefully she's used in a sequel as a possessed animatronic, but yeah, fun characters, funner deaths. That's pretty much all for characters, except of course, the best character of all, Doug! I think this movie could have easily fallen into a look at all these references movie, but actually I think all the fan service was excellently done. Not too frequent, and the ones they went for were deep cuts that felt pretty natural in most cases. My favorite definitely being Sparky. Holy shit, what a reference. The OG rumor being made real. That was an amazing Easter egg. Obviously also tying in with the diner. And speaking of, MatPat was fine. I think I get a lot more ironic enjoyment from his inclusion, but the man deserves it after everything, even if I'm not a huge game theory fan anymore. The way they fit just a theory in was really funny to me, and again, probably not objectively great, but damn it, he's just a fun inclusion. I think Corey's cameo was alright, but a bit of a weird tonal whiplash between scenes. The ant just got Golden Freddy'd and we're heading into the climax, so it felt a little bit odd to me, but it wasn't awful or anything, I just wish it was at another point. I also really appreciated the tiny references with the FNAF World Rainbow, the Midnight Motorist shirt, and the guy named Carl being killed by the cupcake. It was just really fun to see the references. The Ella inclusion was also pretty good. I think if you're gonna reference the book, that was a good way to do so. She was in the trilogy and the Fazbear Fright series. I was honestly expecting Balloon Boy with him being set up and Abby's hello, but I liked Ella's inclusion as well. Speaking of Balloon Boy, I loved his little scenes. What a little shit. Really got me a couple of times and made me laugh as well. I didn't imagine seeing him here. That's really all the notable Easter eggs for me. Of course there's some others, but those were the ones that I had something to say about. The story, I think, is a bit more of a sore spot for some people, and I can understand that. Honestly, watching it for the first time, like I said before, when the whole dream plot was made clear, I was not really on board, but they kind of won me over during the movie. It doesn't take up too much screen time, and I think the payoff with him having that moment of weakness where he was willing to give up Abby to go back was really good, even if it could have been resolved better. I just think the dream sequences were a good way to show his trauma in the movie. They aren't too intrusive, but it does add a much needed, almost mystery element to the film, even if we, the audience, already know the answer. The pull between figuring out the past and figuring out how to survive the present is really compelling to me, and I think it could go even further in the future if Garrett comes back as an animatronic or ghost like the other kids. I think in this movie we get a good sense of Mike realizing what's really important to him, Abby, so that ties up nicely, but the stuff with Garrett is kind of left unresolved, and I think that's on purpose. Even without that though, it's a nice end to it, letting go of that past and focusing on the present, but I can easily see it being explored more in a sequel, and I hope it is because it's really interesting. Outside of that, the Ant plotline was alright. They didn't do too much with it, but it drives the story forward and gives Mike motivation for the movie, which is important. Definitely could have been used a bit more, but I'm glad it didn't overstay its welcome, as it's probably the least interesting plot point to me. Not bad or anything, but it's not as in-depth. Again, could have been if it was tied in more, but it's fine as is. It honestly probably does the best for developing the bond between Abby and Mike, which is probably the most compelling part of the movie. But far more importantly, it gave us Doug. I think one of the most compelling parts of the movie's story is Vanessa and Afton. Pretty obvious choices, but it's very cool. I didn't expect Vanessa Afton, and it made for a pretty interesting dynamic. Only problem, again, is I wish it was more developed. But it made the final confrontation have way more weight to it, and it made Vanessa a much more interesting character. I think she was pretty well handled in the film, and it feels like there's a lot of potential for her character in the future. And I feel like potential really is the word to describe all of this, and a lot of other things about this movie. It's good, but the potential for the future and sequels is really astounding. This movie does a great job at introducing us to this new canon and having a flawed but pretty nice story. But this new universe could really go far in the future, with Mike and Garrett, Vanessa and William, and Abby with her strange bond with the animatronics. I feel like a sequel could far surpass this movie, and that's saying a lot when I still really did enjoy this one and its story. And I hope the sequel can live up to that for me. And that brings us to the end. I really enjoyed my time with the movie despite my complaints. I think the world they've crafted with the movie is excellent and filled with potential for the future, and the movie itself is good fun, especially for fans. While it doesn't deliver much on horror, it does provide interesting characters and amazing practical effects while it crafts its somewhat messy story that I personally enjoyed a ton. With how well it's doing, I'm looking forward to the hopefully inevitable sequel. Like I've said, I think a sequel has a huge amount of potential and would likely surpass the original for me, especially if Scott's taking criticism into account like you said. But that's all for today. And I'll see you all for the sequel discussion someday, assuming it doesn't take another 8 years.